The dining room was a battlefield of clinking silverware and strained politeness. Eleanor, my daughter-in-law, sat at the head of the table, her perfectly manicured nails tapping rhythmically against her wine glass. Her eyes, sharp as ever, darted toward me, perched quietly at the far end. My hands folded over a napkin I hadn't touched. The rest of the family, son James, their 2 teenage kids, and a smattering of cousins chattered about stocks, vacations, and the latest political scandal. I didn't join in. I never did. Not because I didn't have opinions, but because my world, as Eleanor often said, was somewhere else entirely. You know, Dad, Eleanor said, her voice slicing through the noise like a knife. You always seem to be living in your own world. Her smile was tight, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. Don't you ever want to join us here in reality? The table went quiet. James shot her a look, but she ignored it, leaning forward, her gaze pinning me in place. I smiled faintly, the kind of smile you give when you've heard the same jab 100 times. My world's just fine, Eleanor, I said softly. Plenty of room in it. She laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. Room for what? Old memories and dusty books. The cousins chuckled, and James cleared his throat, trying to steer the conversation elsewhere. But Eleanor wasn't done. You're always so quiet. Henry, what's going on in that head of yours? Some grand adventure we don't know about. If only she knew. I sipped my water, letting her words hang in the air. The truth was, my world wasn't just memories or books. It was a place, a real place. One I'd kept secret for decades. A private island, tucked away in the Pacific, where the sand was soft as silk and the stars burned brighter than any city light. But I wasn't about to tell Eleanor that. Not yet. I'd always been the quiet one. Even as a boy, I preferred the company of my thoughts to the chaos of crowds. Growing up in a small Ohio town, I'd spend hours by the creek, imagining far-off places where I could be free from the weight of expectations. My father was a factory worker, my mother a seamstress. They wanted me to be practical, to follow their path. But I dreamed bigger. By 20, I'd saved enough to buy a one-way ticket to California, chasing whispers of opportunity. That's where I met Clara. Clara was fire where I was earth. Her laugh could fill a room, and her dreams were wilder than mine. We met in 1965, at a diner where she worked, her apron stained with coffee and her eyes sparkling with mischief. She'd tease me about my quiet ways, but she loved them too. Henry, she'd say, you've got a whole universe in there, don't you? And I'd blush, because she was right. We married a year later, and together we built something extraordinary, not just a life, but a legacy. By the time I was 30, I'd stumbled into real estate, not because I loved it, but because I was good at it. I had a knack for seeing potential where others saw ruin. Rundown lots, crumbling buildings, I turned them into gold. By 40, I was wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. But Clara and I never let it change us. We lived modestly, raised James in a quiet suburb, and kept our biggest secret close, a tiny island we'd bought in the South Pacific. A haven we escaped to whenever the world felt too heavy. Clara named it Solace. Because that's what it is, she'd said, her feet bare in the sand, her hair dancing in the wind. We'd spend weeks there, just the two of us, swimming in the lagoon, reading under palm trees, planning a future where we'd retire and live out our days in peace. But Clara didn't make it that far. Cancer took her when James was 20, and with her went half my heart. The island became my refuge, a place where I could still feel her, hear her laugh in the waves. I hadn't been back in years, not since James married Eleanor, but it was still mine, a secret I guarded fiercely. Eleanor's voice pulled me back to the dining room. You're doing it again. Henry, she said, her tone half amused, half exasperated. Drifting off to your own little world. I met her eyes, and for a moment, I considered telling her. But no, she wouldn't understand. Not yet. Just thinking about old times. I said, my voice steady. They're better company than you might think. The table laughed, the tension breaking. But Eleanor's eyes lingered on me. Curious now, like she'd caught a glimpse of something she couldn't quite place. I let her wonder. My world wasn't hers to know not until she was ready to see it. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of the guest room in James and Eleanor's sprawling house. The kids' laughter echoed from downstairs, where they played some video game, and I thought about how distant I'd become from them all. James tried to bridge the gap, but Eleanor's sharp edges and my quiet ways didn't mix. She thought I was eccentric, maybe even senile, lost in a fog of memories. She didn't know that my world was real, tangible, waiting for me across the ocean. The next morning, I found Eleanor in the kitchen, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone. She looked up, surprised to see me awake so early. Henry, she said, her voice softer than usual. You're up before the sun. Always have been, I replied, pouring myself a cup. Old habits. She studied me, her usual sharpness dulled by the early hour. You know, I didn't mean to be harsh last night. It's just, you're so hard to read. James says you've always been like that, but I wish you'd let us in a little. I took a sip, letting the warmth settle in my chest. Maybe I will, I said. One day? She raised an eyebrow, skeptical but intrigued. One day? Huh. What's it going to take? A miracle. I smiled, thinking of solace, of the secret I'd kept for so long. Something like that. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor's curiosity grew. She'd ask me questions, small ones at first, about my childhood, my work, Clara. I answered sparingly, dropping hints like breadcrumbs, letting her piece together the man I was. She didn't know it yet, but I was leading her somewhere, not just to a story, but to a truth that would change how she saw me, how she saw everything. By the time James suggested a family vacation, I knew it was time. How about somewhere tropical? I said casually, stirring my tea at breakfast. Eleanor perked up, always eager for a getaway. I know a place, I added, my voice calm but my heart racing. Somewhere special. Where? She asked, leaning forward, her eyes bright with interest. I paused, savoring the moment. An island, I said simply. My island. Her jaw dropped, and for the first time, Eleanor was speechless. I let the silence linger, knowing this was only the beginning. Eleanor's silence didn't last long. By the time we sat down for dinner that evening, her curiosity had ignited into a full-blown interrogation. An island? Henry, she said, her fork hovering over her plate. You're telling me you own an island? Like, a real one? James, sitting beside her, looked as stunned as she did. Dad, is this true? He asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. You've never mentioned anything like this. I shrugged, cutting into my steak with deliberate slowness. Didn't think it was worth mentioning. I said, it's just a place I bought a long time ago. Your mother and I, we loved it there. The table was a sea of wide eyes. The kids, Mia and Ethan, stopped scrolling on their phones, their teenage apathy replaced by intrigue. Wait, Grandpa owns an island? Ethan asked, his voice cracking with excitement. Like, with beaches and stuff. Beaches, palm trees, the works, I said, keeping my tone light. It's called Solace. Solace, Eleanor repeated, testing the word like it might reveal something more. And you've just, what? Been sitting on this secret for decades. I nodded, taking a sip of water to hide the smile tugging at my lips. Something like that. She leaned back, crossing her arms. I don't buy it, she said, her tone sharp but playful. You're pulling our leg. Henry, you're not exactly the tropical island type. James chuckled, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Come on, Dad. If this is real, why haven't you ever taken us there? I set my glass down, meeting his gaze. It was your mother's place as much as mine, I said quietly. After she passed, it didn't feel right to go back without her. Not until now. The room softened at that. Even Eleanor's skepticism faltered, her eyes searching mine for the truth. I could see her mind working, trying to reconcile the quiet old man she thought she knew with the idea of a hidden paradise. So why now? She asked. Why tell us now? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. Maybe I'm tired of keeping it to myself, I said. Maybe I want you all to see it. To understand. Understand what? Mia asked, her voice soft, almost hesitant. I smiled, thinking of Clara's laugh. The way the island had been our sanctuary. What it means to live in my world. The idea of a family trip to Solace took root quickly. Eleanor, ever the planner, dove into logistics, peppering me with questions I sidestepped with vague answers. It's remote, I'd say. Or, we'll figure it out when we get there. She didn't like that, but her excitement outweighed her frustration. James was quieter, watching me with a mix of pride and suspicion, like he was seeing me for the first time. The kids were thrilled, already dreaming of snorkeling and bonfires. As the weeks passed, I prepared for the journey in my own way. I pulled out old photos of Solace, faded Polaroids of Clara and me on the beach, her smile brighter than the sun. I hadn't looked at them in years, and the ache they brought was both painful and sweet. I also made calls to the caretaker I'd hired decades ago, a man named Koa who'd kept the island pristine in my absence. Everything's ready, Mr. Henry, he said, his voice warm over the crackling line. Just like you and Mrs. Clara left it. The night before we left, Eleanor cornered me in the living room. Henry, she said, her voice low, if this is some kind of elaborate joke, you'd better come clean now. I'm not dragging my family across the Pacific for nothing. I looked at her, seeing the spark of doubt still flickering in her eyes. No joke, Eleanor, I said. You'll see. She held my gaze for a moment, then nodded, almost reluctantly. All right, but this better be good. The flight to Fiji was long, and from there, we'd take a private boat to Solace. The kids were glued to their windows, marveling at the turquoise waters below. James kept glancing at me, his expression unreadable, while Eleanor busied herself with travel guides and itineraries. I stayed quiet, my thoughts drifting to the last time I'd made this journey, with Clara by my side. When we landed in Fiji, the heat hit us like a wave, thick and fragrant with salt and flowers. Koa met us at the dock, his weathered face breaking into a grin when he saw me. Mr. Henry, he said, clasping my hand. Been too long. Far too long, I agreed, introducing him to the family. Eleanor eyed him skeptically, but Koa's warmth was disarming, and soon she was asking him about the island's history. He deflected her questions with a laugh, saying, You'll see it for yourself soon enough. The boat ride was 3 hours, the ocean stretching endlessly around us. Mia and Ethan leaned over the railing, pointing at dolphins leaping in the distance. James sat beside me, his voice low. Dad, I still can't believe you never told me about this place. I looked out at the horizon, where Solace was just beginning to appear. A speck of green against the blue. Some things are hard to share, I said, especially when they're tied to someone you've lost. He nodded, his eyes softening. Mom would have loved this, wouldn't she? She did, I said, my voice catching. More than anything. As the island grew closer, I felt a stirring in my chest, a mix of anticipation and fear. Solace was more than a place, it was a piece of me, of Clara, of the life we'd built. Bringing my family here was like opening a locked door, one I'd kept closed for too long. I glanced at Eleanor, who was watching the island with a mix of awe and suspicion. She didn't trust me yet, but she would. Soon, she'd see what my world was really made of. The boat slowed as we approached Solace, its shores unfolding like a painting. The sand glowed white under the late afternoon sun, framed by dense green jungle and swaying palms. A single wooden dock stretched into the water, weathered but sturdy, and beyond it, a path wound toward a small villa nestled among the trees. Eleanor's jaw dropped, her skepticism melting into wonder. This is real, she whispered, almost to herself. Koa guided the boat to the dock, and we stepped onto the island, the air thick with the scent of salt and hibiscus. Mia and Ethan ran ahead, their laughter echoing as they kicked off their shoes and sprinted toward the beach. James lingered beside me, his hand resting on my shoulder. Dad, he said, his voice thick. This is incredible. I nodded, my throat tight. Welcome to Solace. Eleanor was the last to step off the boat, her eyes scanning every detail: the turquoise lagoon, the distant reef, the way the light danced on the water. Henry, she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. How did you keep this a secret? It wasn't easy, I admitted, leading the way toward the villa. But some things are worth protecting. The villa was modest but beautiful, built from local wood and stone, with wide windows that let the ocean breeze flow through. Clara had designed it, her touch in every detail: the hand-woven rugs, the shelves lined with books, the framed sketches of the island she'd drawn during our summers here. I hadn't been back since her death, but Koa had kept it exactly as we'd left it, a time capsule of our life together. As the family explored, I watched their reactions. Mia and Ethan were already planning a swim, their excitement contagious. James wandered the living room, touching the furniture like it might tell him something about his mother. Eleanor, though, was quieter, her usual sharpness replaced by a kind of reverence. She paused at a photo on the wall: Clara and me, laughing on the beach, our arms around each other. She was beautiful, Eleanor said, her voice barely audible. She was, I said, standing beside her. This place was her dream as much as mine. Eleanor turned to me, her eyes searching. Why didn't you ever tell us, Henry? Not just about the island, but about all of this. Who you were. I sighed, looking out at the ocean through the open window. After Clara died, it felt like betraying her to share it. This was our place, our secret. And you, I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. You always seemed so sure you had me figured out. Her cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. I thought you were just distant, lost in your head. I didn't know you were hiding something like this. Not hiding, I corrected gently. Protecting. She nodded, her expression softening. I'm starting to see that. That evening, we gathered on the beach for a bonfire. Koa had set up a spread of fresh fish, tropical fruit, and bread he'd baked himself. The kids roasted marshmallows, their faces glowing in the firelight. while James and Eleanor sat close, their usual tension replaced by a quiet ease. I told stories about how Clara and I found the island, how we'd spent weeks here with no one but each other, how she'd taught me to dance under the stars. The family listened, rapt, as if I were revealing a side of myself they'd never imagined. Eleanor, though, was still piecing things together. "So you made all your money in real estate," she said, her tone more curious than skeptical now. "And instead of buying a mansion or a yacht, you bought this." I chuckled. "Mansions and yachts are loud. This is peace." She smiled, a real smile this time, and I felt something shift between us. For the first time, I saw respect in her eyes, not just for the island, but for me. The next morning, I woke early, slipping out to the beach before the others stirred. The sun was just rising, painting the sky in pinks and golds. I walked to the water's edge, letting the waves lap at my feet, and closed my eyes. Clara was here, in the wind, in the rhythm of the tide. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed this place, how much I'd needed to come back. When I returned to the villa, Eleanor was awake, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked. She shook her head. "Too much to take in. This place, it's like something out of a dream." "It is," I said, sitting beside her. "Clara used to say it was where we could be our true selves." Eleanor looked at me, her usual guardedness gone. "I misjudged you, Henry," she said quietly. "I thought you were just stuck in the past. But this is something else." I smiled, feeling a weight lift. "You're not the first to think that. But I'm glad you're here." Over the next few days, Solace worked its magic. The kids explored every inch of the island, snorkeling in the lagoon and climbing the low cliffs. James opened up about his childhood, asking questions about Clara he'd never dared to ask before. Eleanor, though, was the biggest surprise. She let go of her need to control, her phone forgotten as she joined the kids in the water or sat with me to watch the sunset. I saw glimpses of the woman James had fallen in love with, warm, curious, alive. But there was more to show them. Solace wasn't just a pretty vibe, it held secrets even I hadn't fully shared. On the fourth day, I announced we'd take a hike to the island's heart, a place Clara and I had called the Sanctuary. "It's special," I told them, keeping my tone light. "You'll see." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, but she didn't question me. She was starting to trust my world, and that was enough for now. The path to the sanctuary was narrow, winding through dense jungle where the air was thick with the hum of insects and the scent of blooming flowers. I led the way, my steps sure despite the years since I'd last walked this trail. James followed close behind, carrying a backpack with water and snacks, while Mia and Ethan bounded ahead, their excitement uncontainable. Eleanor brought up the rear, her eyes wide as she took in the vibrant green canopy above. "This better be worth it, Henry," she called, her voice teasing but laced with genuine curiosity. "I'm not exactly a jungle trekker." I chuckled, glancing back at her. "It's worth it. Trust me." The trail opened into a clearing, and I heard gasps behind me. The sanctuary was a hidden grove, a natural cathedral of towering palms and flowering vines, centered around a crystal-clear pool fed by a small waterfall. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled patterns on the mossy ground. In the middle of the pool stood a stone statue, weathered but graceful, a figure of a woman, her arms outstretched, her face serene. Clara had commissioned it, a tribute to the island's beauty and the peace we'd found here. "My God," Eleanor whispered, stepping forward. "What is this place?" "The sanctuary," I said, my voice soft. "Clara's favorite spot. She said it was where the island's heart beat." Mia knelt by the pool, dipping her fingers into the water. "It's so clear," she said, her voice awed, like glass. Ethan climbed onto a nearby rock, peering at the statue. "Is that Grandma?" I nodded, my throat tightening. "It's her spirit. At least. She loved this place more than anywhere." James stood beside me, his eyes fixed on the statue. "You never told me about this, Dad," he said quietly. "Not even when I was a kid." I sighed, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Some things you have to see to understand." We spent the morning in the sanctuary, the kids splashing in the pool while James and I sat on the rocks, talking about Clara, her laugh, her stubbornness, the way she'd made every moment brighter. Eleanor wandered the grove, her usual restlessness replaced by a quiet awe. At one point, she approached the statue, studying it closely. "She must have been incredible," she said, almost to herself. "She was," I replied, joining her. "She made me better." Eleanor looked at me, her eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "I'm starting to get why you kept this place to yourself," she said. "It's sacred." I nodded, grateful for her understanding. "It's not just the island," I said. "It's what it represents. A life built on love, not just things." She smiled, a rare, unguarded smile. "You're full of surprises, Henry." That afternoon, I revealed the sanctuary's final secret. Hidden behind the waterfall was a small cave, its entrance concealed by vines. I led the family inside, where the air was cool and the walls gleamed with quartz. On a stone ledge sat a wooden box, carved with intricate patterns. Clara had made it, a keepsake for our dreams. "What's in it?" Mia asked, her eyes wide. I opened the box, revealing a collection of letters, photos, and small mementos, a seashell from our first visit, a locket with Clara's picture, a map we'd drawn of the island. "This is our story," I said, passing the items to them. "Mine and Clara's. I wanted you to see it." James held a letter, his hands trembling as he read Clara's handwriting. "She wrote this to you," he said, his voice breaking. "About me, when I was born." I nodded, my eyes stinging. "She loved you so much, James. She wanted you to have a piece of this place, even if you never knew it." Eleanor took a photo, one of Clara and me dancing on the beach. "You two were so happy," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I wish I'd known her." "You're knowing her now?" I said. "This place is her." That night, we sat around another bonfire, the stars blazing above us. The kids begged for more stories, and I obliged, telling them about the time Clara tried to teach me to surf, or how we'd spent a whole night counting stars. Eleanor listened, her usual sharpness replaced by a quiet respect. James held my hand, his eyes glistening, and I felt a connection with him I hadn't felt in years. But there was one more surprise to come. The next morning, I gathered the family in the villa's living room. "There's something else you need to know," I said, my heart pounding. "This island isn't just mine anymore. It's yours." Eleanor blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "I'm signing it over to the family," I said. "To you, James, Mia, Ethan. It's time for Solace to be part of your lives, too." James shook his head, stunned. "Dad, you can't. This is too much." "It's not," I said firmly. "Clara would want this. She'd want you to make your own memories here." Eleanor stared at me, her eyes wide. "Henry, I don't even know what to say." "Say you'll take care of it," I said, smiling. "That's all I ask." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "We will," I promise. For the first time, I felt like Eleanor truly saw Minute as the quiet old man in the corner, but as someone with a world worth sharing. And in that moment, I knew Clara was smiling, wherever she was. The days on Solace passed like a dream, each one weaving the family closer together. Mia and Ethan took to the island like they'd been born there, diving into the lagoon and racing along the beach. James spent hours exploring the villa, finding traces of his mother in every Cornera book with her notes in the margins. A scarf she'd left on a chair. Eleanor, though, was the one who surprised me most. She shed her city polish, her heels replaced by bare feet, her phone forgotten as she joined the kids in their adventures or sat with me to watch the waves. One afternoon, as we walked along the shore, she turned to me, her expression thoughtful. "Henry," she said, "I owe you an apology." I raised an eyebrow, surprised. "For what?" "For thinking you were less than you are," she said, her voice steady but sincere. "I thought you were just some eccentric old man, stuck in your own head. But you've lived this incredible life, and you built something beautiful here. I was wrong about you." I stopped walking, looking out at the ocean. "You weren't entirely wrong," I said. "I do live in my own world. But it's not because I'm lost. It's because I found something worth holding on to." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "Clara was lucky to have you." "No," I said softly. "I was the lucky one." That evening, we held a ceremony of sorts, a way to honor Clara and welcome the family to Solace. We gathered at the sanctuary, the pool glowing under the moonlight. I brought the wooden box from the cave, placing it on a rock beside the statue. "This island is yours now," I told them. "But it comes with a promisito: keep it a place of peace, of love, of dreams." James took my hand, his voice thick. "We will, Dad. I promise." Mia and Ethan nodded, their young faces serious. Eleanor stepped forward, placing a hand on the statue. "We'll make her proud," she said, and I knew she meant it. The rest of the trip was a blur of laughter and connection. We swam. We ate. We told stories until our voices grew hoarse. I watched my family come alive in a way I hadn't seen in years, and I felt a peace I hadn't known since Clara's death. Solace was no longer just my refuge, it was theirs, too. On our last day, Eleanor found me on the porch, watching the sunrise. "Henry," she said, sitting beside me, "I've been thinking. This place, it's changed us. All of us." I smiled, sipping my coffee. "That's what it does." She hesitated, then continued. "I want to bring the kids back every summer. Make it a tradition. Would that be okay?" I looked at her, seeing the woman I'd misjudged as much as she'd misjudged me. "More than okay," I said. "It's what Clara would have wanted." She smiled, a real, unguarded smile. And for the first time, I felt like we were family, not just in name, but in heart. As we boarded the boat to leave, I took one last look at Solace, its shores glowing under the morning sun. I felt Clara's presence, her warmth in the breeze, and I knew I'd done the right thing. My world wasn't just mine, Anna Marie, it belonged to them, too. Back home, the air felt different. The bustle of the city, the hum of traffic, the weight of routine, it all seemed smaller, less important. Solace had changed us, just as Eleanor had said. The kids talked endlessly about the island, planning their next trip before we'd even unpacked. James was quieter, but I saw a new light in his eyes, a connection to his mother he'd never fully grasped before. And Eleanor, she was softer, less guarded, her sharp edges smoothed by the island's magic. One evening, a few weeks after our return, Eleanor invited me to dinner. It was just the two of us, a rare occurrence. She'd cooked a simple meal. Nothing like her usual elaborate spreads, and we sat at the kitchen table. The silence comfortable. "Henry," she said, setting her fork down. "I've been thinking a lot about solace. About what it means to you. To us. I want to make sure we honor it." I leaned back, studying her. "What do you have in mind?" She took a deep breath, her eyes bright with purpose. "I want to start a family fund. To maintain the island. Keep it pristine. Like you and Clara did. Maybe even open it up to others, people who need a place to heal. To find peace." I raised an eyebrow, surprised but intrigued. "You want to share solace?" "Not all of it," she said quickly. "The sanctuary. The villa, those stay ours. But there's so much land. Henry, we could build a small retreat. Nothing fancy. A place for people to come and find what we found." I thought of Clara, of her belief that beauty was meant to be shared. "She'd like that," I said, my voice soft. "But it has to stay true to what solace is. No resorts. No tourists. Just sanctuary." Eleanor nodded, her expression serious. "I promise. We'll do it right." Over the next few months, Eleanor threw herself into the project, researching sustainable designs and reaching out to COA for advice. James and the kids were on board, sketching ideas for cabins and nature trails. I watched, amazed, as my family took solace into their hearts, making it their own while honoring its roots. One day, Mia showed me a drawing she'd made, a sketch of the sanctuary, with Clara's statue at the center. "I want to be an artist like Grandma," she said, her eyes shining. "I want to draw solace, so people know what it feels like." I hugged her, my heart full. "You already do, sweetheart." Ethan, meanwhile, had taken to writing stories about the island, wild tales of pirates and hidden treasure. "Grandpa," he said one afternoon, "you think there's really treasure on Solace?" I laughed, ruffling his hair. "The treasure's the island itself," I said. "But you keep looking. You might find something." As for me, I felt lighter than I had in years. Sharing solace hadn't diminished it, it had made it bigger, brighter, alive with new dreams. I started visiting more often, sometimes alone, sometimes with the family. Each trip was a chance to feel Clara, to remember the life we'd built and the legacy we'd left. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table back home, Eleanor raised her glass. "To Henry," she said, her voice warm, "for showing us your world." The family cheered, and I smiled, raising my glass in return. "To Solace," I said, "and to all of us." As we drank, I looked around the table at James, his eyes full of pride, at Mia and Ethan, their faces alight with dreams, at Eleanor, no longer the skeptic but a partner in my world. I thought of Clara, of the island we'd loved, and I knew she was with us, her spirit woven into every moment. My world wasn't just my own anymore. It was theirs, to a shared sanctuary, a place where love and dreams could live forever. And in that, I found my own kind of solace.